So we're going to share with you some of our thoughts on what's going on in the market, and around a topic that we call the intelligent workplace. So I guess this could be seen as a metaphor for a number of things. It could be seen as a metaphor for the tears of a nation when we lost the Ashes to you this year. It could be seen as the UK, which has had the longest single run of days of rain in its history. We went from January the 1st to I think it was February the 21st with rain every single day. Or it could be seen as a metaphor for the industry and some of the challenges that we're seeing in the industry. So I think we're kind of facing some pretty interesting times at the moment. Some of the markets you're working in are maturing, so that's leading to a different dynamic. We're going to talk a lot about the threat of AI and what's going on, the opportunity as well around that. We're seeing the rise of new competition. We're seeing some real regulatory divergence. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well. And obviously we're seeing some pretty uncertain times. But what we hope today is to show you the opportunity. So we're hoping, that's gone, an extra slide on, yeah. We're hoping to show you that there is an opportunity out there, and we're going to cover some of those areas. I think the double act, I got a nod, point. I think one of the things that struck me more than anything in the last sort of year or two that we've been working in the market is the key thing and the key competitive advantage is actually really understanding the context of your customers. When we look at how we're going to deploy new services like AI, and we're going to talk around that, understanding the context of your customer is actually probably the most important thing we think there is at the moment in the market. So we'll be reinforcing that thought as we go through. But Patrick, maybe you want to share what we've seen from some of the Australian buyers.
Yeah, and just a quick teaser ahead to a session that Trent will be doing later on where we'll take you through a lot more of the data in detail. But this is a study that we did specifically in Q3 last year of 400 Australian telecoms buyers. And we asked them a variety of different questions about their usage of, adoption of technology and attitudes towards that. I think really interestingly here, as you can see, micro businesses, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone in the room, very cost conscious. We gave all of the participants in the survey, they get 20 different multiple choice options, and they can also write in as well. And what we just selected was the top 3 strategic priorities for businesses. Where it gets interesting is as you start to come out of the micro business, you can see that using AI to drive efficiency and productivity is the #1 strategic goal for Australian businesses. I think also the improving cybersecurity and compliance piece. This was something, we've been doing this research for 5-6 years, tens of thousands of businesses globally. Cybersecurity, data compliance, it disappeared. It was almost table stakes within communication platforms a few years ago. But as we've seen AI rise in importance, we're also seeing data compliance, data sovereignty, business security, cybersecurity and compliance rise in parallel with that. Actually, the Australian data really does mirror what we see in the US and the UK as well as comparative markets. So I think that's important.
And last year I shared similar research we did a year earlier, and the main sort of difference has been that rise in AI. So that has really become a front-footed thing now in the Australian market. We've seen it's probably a year or two different to some of the other markets, but now it's definitely front and centre in Australian buyers' concerns.
And that really impacts what you need to do as a provider. And as I said, we've got a lot more data coming up specifically about what you need, what Australian businesses are looking for in terms of purchasing. But one of the key things I'd highlight here, price and product are always going to be important. They're never going to go away from the top of the lists. But actually, integration came back as the #1 requirement that an Australian business wants in their provider. They want someone who's going to be able to integrate communication software into different platforms. And that's a really key pillar of a concept about the intelligent workplace that we'll talk about. The final one that we've highlighted on the right here is expertise in particular product niches. And Matt, you do consulting projects all over the world. Actually having expertise in contact center or CRM integration, or whatever that specific area might be, is incredibly valuable for businesses.
Yeah, so maybe if we move on, this slide really was part of the reason we developed a new concept last year, was we're trying to get our minds around how the market is changing, we were seeing our research pointing to the increased requirement for integration. We were seeing our research highlight the merging of the big CX opportunity merging with UCaaS, and that really made us start to think about that in a different way. So the first piece, if you look at this is what we call the intelligent workplace. And at the center, there's some common enterprise requirement, but we're seeing the boundaries of UCaaS, CCaaS, CRM, productivity, those silos really break down. And we'll talk later, but I'm sure you're already seeing, traditional silos in those areas get eroded. So we see that erosion happening, and then we see, a lot of integration.
And this isn't just a benefit for benefit's sake. What this allows you to do, if as an Australian organisation or an organisation anywhere around the world, you can effectively create the intelligent workplace, you can automate workflows throughout your entire business. So that might be an interaction that comes through into the contact center, goes through your collaboration software, goes to a subject matter expert internally, they feed that into a CRM system, and then it goes back out through the customer. These sort of automated workflows are incredibly difficult to do if you don't have an integrated and open technology system. And I think that the sort of final thing that I'll point to on this slide, we saw how important security was. Wrapping all of this in security and compliance, and particularly when we've done some of the research about the Southeast Asian markets, is absolutely critical. So the security and compliance layer around the intelligent workplace is really important.
And the fundamental thing that you can't really achieve this without really is data. So having data flowing between these systems in a common way, and there's new standards coming around to help that, things like the VCON standard, which are going to enable more easier flow of information and data. But yeah, this is how we're kind of seeing the market, and it's the way we're kind of starting to think about it. We're less thinking about it in silos, we're more thinking about it in this broader integrated world.
And that changes how, as a communication or technology provider, you have to provide services. So that traditional product focus is no longer enough if you want to be able to cater for the entire of the intelligent workplace.
Yeah, so traditional industry was very, very good at selling product at margin in volume. And now, in this new world, we're certainly being asked about integration, workflows, as Patrick has already said. And that's driving thoughts about which channels can enable that. Are the channels we're working with at the moment able to go through that transition? And indeed, as we look, there's different buyer groups getting involved in that discussion as well. So this is quite a fundamental challenge to how we've traditionally run our businesses, and we think it's kind of a new paradigm. And there's a hell of a lot of challenge here, but there's a hell of a lot of opportunity as well in terms of potential to differentiate and succeed.
And I think when Matt talks about the challenges there, that piece on buyer groups is really important. Traditionally, a telecom sale has been made to a technical buyer internally. That is no longer the case in a huge amount of these services. It's our research is showing it's a much more holistic business decision. You're going to have to speak to a range of different stakeholders in order to attract business. One of the other key trends that Matt mentioned earlier on is the integration between unified communications and contact center. And I don't think it's something that we can ignore. It's an absolutely key pillar of the intelligent workplace. We're forecasting more than 24% growth in the SMB contact center market. So everyone will be aware of previously, contact center software was generally the proviso of much larger businesses. Actually, that SMB segment, so organizations with less than 25 employees, is going to grow significantly. And what we've seen is a host of the market's leading vendors, many of them in this room here, 8x8, Microsoft, NICE, RingCentral, Zoom, all launch converged offerings. But it's not just the international players that have done that as well.
And also all our local large local players like Access 4 Comms Group, Zoom, Switch Connect, all our sponsors you'll see are playing into that now and bringing out solutions. And also the other angle is what we've seen in terms of the contact center guys integrating with the CRMs. So you're seeing, very interesting integrations and efforts with, people like Salesforce, Amazon, etc., where, those players are coming together to offer solutions. So it's coming around. So, when we ask service providers globally, who do you see as your biggest threat in the future? They actually call out CRM vendors as their biggest ultimate competition, which is really interesting and really talks to that idea of the intelligent workplace. When we talk to voice service providers, who do you see as our competition? CRM. And at the moment they're happy or unhappy bedfellows, so we're all having to work together. So you see a lot of working together. But you can also see in some markets the players actually are launching their own voice services. So the CRM players also offering some of their own voice capabilities. So again, we're seeing that kind of mashing together, and we're seeing it in all sorts of different ways. Some ways it's partnership, some ways it's cooperation, some ways it's competition. But we're definitely seeing that piece come together.
And I think that's a really interesting point. If you talk to any organisation, what is their primary technology system? Is it their CRM system? Is it their particular line of business system? And one of the things that we've looked at in our research are what are the most common integrations? So the graph on the left is what have you integrated your telephony system into? And as you can see, Microsoft Teams as collaboration software coming out on top there. Analytics solutions, we've got various providers, obviously Tollring and various Kixi, all providing those analytics solutions. Those are really key parts of the market. And Matt mentioned previously the CRM. So what we see is that telecoms actually is an infusing addition to a lot of these different platforms. So that integration piece is absolutely vital. And I think not just from an integration piece, it's what then you can do. We mentioned vertical line of business software. That's becoming even more important.
Yeah. And we are seeing, and if you think back to how are you going to compete in this world of the intelligent workplace, and how are you going to compete in a world of AI? Well, you've got to understand the context of your customer. So we'll talk later about the AI, some of the AI guys coming to the market, but a lot of them have been verticalized because you really, if you're going to be successful, you've got to understand the workflows, the integrations that are needed by your vertical. So we are seeing an increased focus at all levels in the market on integration. I do a lot of work on M&A and working with one of the biggest MSPs globally. They now are not looking to roll up other MSPs, they're only looking for players who've got a verticalized approach. So you see some verticalized players who are just vertical. Some of my favorite examples, a couple of from the hospitality industry, and the one in the middle, we've based its whole business on dentistry in the US. And this piece at the bottom, we have a thing called Channel Insights, and if you speak to Chris, he'll show you. This is a split of, we track, I think it's 4,000 Australian channels, and this is a split of the focus of that group. So which verticals are, and we do it for New Zealand as well and some other markets, which are the areas of most focus. So not surprisingly, they tend to be the comms intensive sectors. So you see quite a focus on healthcare, education, public sector, focus, and you'll see on the right, this is sort of general approach from our global service provider studies, that a lot of people now have been doing vertical marketing collateral. Some people are now doing more bespoke software, off-the-shelf bespoke integrations, and then there are a group of people who are really focusing down now on having specialist sales teams, support teams. So we think this is a trend that's really taking off in the market, and if you're thinking about how do you differentiate, which I guess you all will be, it's certainly a key area.
Yeah, and not a shameless plug for Cavell, but we've done more projects over the last 12 months looking at specific vertical markets than we've done in the 6 years that I've been at Cavell previously. As these markets, Australia as an example, becomes more and more competitive, one way of differentiating is focusing on the healthcare sector, for example. But do you understand the requirements of healthcare businesses in Australia? And one of the only ways to do that is, I think, through market research. Shameless plug. We've managed to get quite a long way here in terms of the presentation without mentioning a bit of an elephant in the room. We've used this slide previously, but it's AI.
Yeah.
And the graph on the left comes again from our study of Australian businesses. So we asked organisations, are you already using artificial intelligence within their telephony solutions? As you can see, the vast majority of them are already using AI. That does, as you would expect, vary by business size. So as you can see, that matched up with the research that I showed you earlier on. Smaller businesses, less likely, more likely to be cost conscious, less likely to use AI as their primary focus. But as you reach larger businesses, AI within telecoms is absolutely critical.
And AI may be being used for very simple use cases at the moment, maybe just be using transcription or some of the more simple use cases?
Yeah, it's absolutely everywhere within communication. So, and Matt mentioned some of them there. We see it within meeting experience in terms of auto caption and summarization, in call recording software. I think the really interesting piece is that a lot of you I know are working on translation capabilities, opening up new global markets with real-time translation services. That is revelatory. I put codecs on there for any of the techies out there. There's some really interesting things happening in video and audio codecs using AI in terms of optimizing that workflow and improving that collaborative call experience. The one that we have done probably the most investigation on out of all of these different areas of AI and communications would be the sort of Trojan horse that we're talking about in terms of voice agents.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've seen most interestingly is that, and probably where most of the investment's gone and new startups have come around voice agents. And a lot of those, as we say, have been vertical. And people are sometimes using it have separated it from their core voice capabilities, so they can use it, get into the client, and then potentially sell the broader comms solution later. So it's probably been the biggest area of focus, I would say.
And as Matt was saying before, in that survey we did previously, it saw CRM as some of the biggest competitors. Actually, AI startups were also ranked really highly in terms of the fear of potential disruption from AI startups. So we wanted to give you a bit of...
I think it was second, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so
I think,
after
one of the top three.
People saw AI startups as their second biggest.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the types of voice AI that we're seeing, because we think this is where the real value is within the room. So you've got vertical specific voice AI that Matt talked about, so that might be utilizing specific data, using specific patterns within a particular market sector that can recognize that. We've seen a lot of providers differentiate on that. We've seen infrastructure builders, so that's effectively where you can take, for example, the OpenAI voice capabilities and plug it into your solution. Horizontal, so more broad focused in terms of that voice AI. And also we've seen the specialist CCaaS and telco voice AI vendors. And from the telco side, I think the asset that everyone has in this room is voice expertise. And I don't know how many times we talked about how rich and valuable that voice data is. You have a tool that a lot of other organizations trying to get into this space don't have in terms of the richness of that voice data.
I think the other tool that we often forget is you've got route to market. So the biggest challenge actually for these AI agent businesses is normally route to market. So, and it's probably been the same for the last 20 years I've been running the business, but it's, I think, the biggest challenge and so easily overlooked. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what we've done here, we've just highlighted some of the key characteristics of some of those different providers. And Matt mentioned route to market. What we've seen is a lot of these businesses have spun up very quickly, often with very effective softwares in a particular vertical sector. But unfortunately, the other thing that they lack, that a lot of people in this room have, is a channel and a go-to-market. They've got a direct sales play directly from online. They may do very well on counterpart referral from a particular vertical, but actually that doesn't necessarily translate to mass market success. So we're seeing this huge boom in AI and voice agent startups, but actually we think over time there might be a bit of contraction.
And
there.
Finbar in your team, I think, was tracking something like 300?
Yeah, so my colleague Finbar Begley unfortunately didn't make the cut for the Australia trip.
His partner's having a baby next week.
He is expecting a baby, so that would have been slightly bad on the mother-to-be. But yeah, we did an analysis of nearly 300 of these businesses to look at how much funding they've got, how successful we think they're going to be. So if anyone's interested in who you should be partnering with, do get in touch on that. I also wanted I've just brought a couple of other examples up here. So this is the infrastructure play, and this is we don't expect everyone to be able to develop a spectacular AI capability internally. You can utilize AI partners. You can utilize OpenAI's API and bring it into your software to benefit from some of that capability. There are options in terms of using infrastructure providers and the market's leading large language models and AI specialists to really amplify your solutions. The last one's here, just a couple of horizontal focuses, and a couple of the guys on here we know very well. I think this is a really interesting piece, and it goes back to that point that Matt was talking about previously. Actually, we see AI voice potentially integrated into every area. So not just into UCaaS, not just into CCaaS, but actually into CRM, into direct web chat, into voice notes even. We've seen particular examples. We've got some generational research coming out later this year, and everyone likes a voice note. There's still value in that voice data. So couple of key things. And the final area that I think is really important, the CCaaS and telco space. is really interesting. These guys have got huge marketing development budgets. They've put huge amounts of value into their own capability around AI. So if you're a partner and you want to add a CCaaS proposition to your portfolio, who do you select based on their AI capability? Or who do you select based on their AI ability?
I would also call out Tata here, just as an example. I think
Yeah.
carriers, we're being asked quite a bit at the moment about what is the network opportunity for carriers with AI? What's the differentiation a network could have? And I think Tata's one of the more sort of front-footed on that behalf, because there's quite a lot of thought that if with their network capability they can place processing power, LLM power, much closer to the customer, and potentially change cost models, cut down resilience, the security, the sovereignty piece. So we're being asked quite a lot at the moment to, from a consulting side, to think through that problem for bigger carriers who have network capability. Really, where does that network advantage come through in this new world? So it's an interesting there's quite a few interesting thought patterns around how can you leverage your sovereignty assets, your network asset to empower AI.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. It's utilizing your critical capability. What's the USP that you've got that you can leverage using AI? And that's the really important piece that I think is important to think about. There's some key themes that I wanted to highlight here, just that we think are going to shape the future of voice AI and where it's going. Model context protocol, so a shared standard for sharing data between different language models and AI models. That's going to be really important. Matt mentioned VCons that we didn't put on this slide, but also standardized protocols that are going to make anonymized, secure transfer of data even more important. Agent-to-agent communication. This is something that, as I said, our colleague Finbar, who runs our CX practice, has been looked into a lot. You may have all seen the news about Clawbot within WhatsApp. That capability of your own bot talking to a customer provider bot in the next few years is going to be absolutely massive. So it's actually taking the human out of some of those interactions just to make our day-to-day lives more easier. Agent orchestration, I think we're fully aware of. Speech-to-speech, I think, is another key area. And that's the piece that I think is so important, that every time I speak to voice providers, that voice data is so valuable. The amount of alleles of data you get from a voice transaction in compared to an asynchronous message is a magnitude of 10. So that voice data is so important.
And also the ability not to have to transcribe everything into text, then bring it back into voice. So cutting out that step is where a lot of people are focusing time and effort.
And the final thing there, agentic AI, this has caused a big debate in the analyst and technology community generally. What is your definition of agentic? But ultimately, I think it's systems that are going to be able to plan and act on your behalf. So it's not just you putting information and getting it back, it's actually going to be able to do some sort of actions on your behalf. So whether that is organize your inbox, whatever that might be, that's one of the key areas of development that we think we're going to see. Those are the 6 future areas that we think are going to be important. What does that actually look like in terms of realism? Most customers are actually at a relatively rudimentary stage of utilizing AI. You saw those statistics before. Only around 40% of micro businesses in Australia are even using AI within their telecoms. So most customers are going to be at the absolutely basic stage of voice automation, if they're there at all. So that is really basic routing and authentication. Most of the vendor capabilities are ahead of that, so we've already got to some of those more advanced automation capabilities in terms of scheduling appointments, two-factor, those sort of areas utilizing AI. But we can get way out in the future, and if you look at some of what the leading AI companies are doing, if you look at Anthropic, if you look at some of those guys, Cognigy that's been acquired, some of that predictive and autonomous work is the next phase. So not just utilizing data that's there, but actually creating follow-up stages is key. But we're seeing most customers more in the basic stage, and we haven't got to that predictive autonomous phase yet. One of the big questions with AI, how do you make any money out of it? Or is it only going to be OpenAI, Microsoft, Amazon, the large providers that make money out of AI? Actually, we don't think that at all. And what we've highlighted here is, at the moment, we're seeing 3 ways in which customers primarily pay for AI. Usage-based, subscription, or outcome-based. Outcome-based is actually the one, Matt, I think we've seen least from a customer side.
Early on it's mainly been around the subscription, the usage-based approaches, but you're certainly seeing a move there.
And I think how it's sold is really key. We've seen it bundled into core products, and increasingly we're seeing it as an add-on, because it's really difficult sometimes to understand that usage basis and token that into a straight bundle. So I think increasingly as we go over the next few years, we're going to see more and more in terms of bundled add-ons. But this is how we're generally seeing it sold. But there are some real best practices that we think are worth sort of thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of point is, where do you start, what do you do? I think what we've seen is whatever you do, take a thought leadership position. So even if you haven't got the services yet, your customer might not be ready for them, but start leading the debate. Most of your vendors and partners will have materials and advice you can use. Really take a thought leadership position, because if you don't engage with your customers. I think we showed earlier about 40% of customers will come to you first, but if you don't engage with them, they will go somewhere else. So, you need to be prepared to engage. I would say don't be beige. So there is a potential just to say, well, I've covered the AI, I've got an AI receptionist, we're kind of done. And that's generally where we've seen the not really working. It's where people have thought through some of that vertical piece, some of the specialization, how the use cases, really thought through where can I really add value in my base, is really where we've seen value. And also, you can steal an idea from ours if you like. We do a thing called lunchtime learning every Wednesday, where the team bring the different tools and things they've seen and they've used. We've really encouraged a kind of a community of a sharing approach internally about how people are using tools. And I find it fascinating because most of my analyst team are miles ahead of me, obviously. So it's a great opportunity to kind of share and learn. And the other thing is looking at some of the benefits are immediate from an internal operational point of view. And if you get me over a beer, I'll tell you how it's changed my business and saved me a lot of money. And a lot of that has been actually in the way we operate the business internally. So, these are some of the things you can start thinking about straight away and start implementing without necessarily being, launching the most advanced service in the market. So, I think we're now just going to finish up by sort of talking through what's your overall strategic playbook you could take. We think you've got kind of probably three choices as a business right now. And they're not necessarily isolated, but it's very hard to execute everything at once. One is this specialization. I think as a business now, you really have to think about how you're specializing. How are you really specializing your business? How are you building specific solutions to understand your customer? Scale, and I'll talk a little bit why that's important in a minute, but we're definitely seeing consolidation and tooling to drive scale in this space in the market. And the other option is obviously diversifying your product set. And if we go to the next slide, Patrick, when we talk about products, this is a survey of service providers again, globally. It's not specific to APAC, but asking what they see as currently important and what they think is future going to be important. And obviously, the UC, voice enablement, productivity space is really, really important at the moment. But some of the areas they're thinking are going to be important in the future is obviously security contact center. But CRM, interestingly, messaging services, out there. I always have a little laugh at IoT on this diagram because I think for 10 years people have been saying it's going to be massively important to all their business. They've quite yet to find to make it go to the top. But, and this is actually drives our focus and your focus, Patrick.
Yeah, so areas out and to the right that we think are becoming important in the future. We've just launched a Cavell Impact series, so if anyone's interested in messaging services, what you can monetize from a security perspective, we'll talk about security now. That's something that we've really focused on. And I think that stat there at the bottom says it all. If you're interested in terms of what you could sell as a security add-on, do reach out to Chris and myself and we'll talk about some of the examples that we've seen. But 52% of the organizations that we surveyed said that they would like to buy cybersecurity services from their telecoms provider. They would like to use you for those services. So there's a real opportunity there in various areas that we've highlighted.
Yeah, maybe we go on to the scaling.
Yeah.
So scaling is particularly, if you just click through for me, why are people looking for scale, particularly in the UCaaS space? There's a cost focus we saw from the SME. So you've got to hit a cost point. Our margins are being driven down there. So naturally, therefore, you're probably going to need scale to be able to hit the cost points that you require. Also, acquisition costs are rising as markets mature. So as market matures, you see, so in some cases, 2 to 3 times ARR cost of acquisition. So that is driving the require to scale, and actually it's driving, in some cases, M&A, where people are saying it's actually cheaper to buy a customer base than it is, even if I churn some of it, than if I acquired it, the cost of acquisition. And really, that operational efficiency and buying power. So, you're seeing, certainly in the SME, lots of people taking a scaling strategy now, saying, we can't, and you're seeing, particularly in some of the other markets, like the US, where there has been quite a lot of acquisitions going on in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, particularly in the SME space.
So if you can't scale, you can specialize additionally.
Yeah, and it's kind of easily said than done. What do you do if you think about your specialization strategy? The first thing we do when we go and work with companies around this is really look at the customer data. You've got a gold mine of existing customers who've got trends, the way they buy things. You've got lots of data, maybe around the segment they're working in, the use cases they're using you for. So really diving in and understanding what you're using. Possibly the best use of AI I've seen so far was somebody who was using AI to look at their voice data. So they looked at their voice data and they found they had customers with a large amount of inbound data. So they decided that would actually be a great demographic to sell AI agents to. So they were using AI to analyze their customer data to find out where they should sell future product, which I thought was kind of fascinating in a way. So you've got a load of customer data. How can you analyze that data? How can you use AI? And specialization approach is really, doesn't necessarily need to be about vertical. Verticalization can be pretty tricky. If you're in a small market, if you're in the US and you want to, I remember a very good business who uses I think they use the Net Sapiens platform. My friends are here from there, who were focusing on the pet, basically killing termites. And this communications player was only focused on that segment and understood the integrations, everything you needed for that segment, and did tremendously well. Well, actually, maybe that's a good idea in Australia, actually, I just thought. I was thinking it might be a small sector, but here it might be a huge sector. But, in the US, sometimes it's quite easy what I'm saying. A small sector can be quite large in opportunity. But you can think more than that. You can think, are there common use cases to a few sectors where I could, really invest in? Are there sectors that actually reference off each other? So, yeah, I think ultimately the specialization approach can also be really being local. So I've seen quite a lot of people going back to really localizing their approach to certain areas of the market as well. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting area.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be verticals, could be regulatory expertise. And we won't go through all of these questions, but we would love it if you would talk to us about questions that resonate for your business. If we've not talked about something today in the research that you'd like to know about, come and find me, come and find Chris, come and find Matt. We'd love to assist. And we already have a huge amount of data that I think will be valuable for everyone in this room. Whether you're looking for market sizing, whether you're looking for help with marketing, whether you want help in terms of potential M&A or scaling strategy that Matt was talking about. So I think all of those questions are key, and I think considering the mineral resources of Australia, we'd love to help you find that pot of gold.
Yeah, we'd love to find that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, of course. So thank you very much. I hope you found that interesting and a good start to the day.
Excellent. Round of applause for Matthew Townend, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.